Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Good evening and welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. If you're listening to the show and probably watching it, you can do so on KGRA's Facebook page or on YouTube by going to KGRA, typing Meanwhile Here on Earth into your browser, and once there, you can access previous shows as well. Become a KGRA subscriber and gain immediate access to all of the thousands and thousands of programs and their huge archive of shows on UFOs and other paranormal subjects. No monologue tonight. I'd like to go right to our guest for the evening. Stephen Bassett is the executive director of Paradigm Research Group, founded in 1996 to end the government-imposed embargo on the truth behind extraterrestrial-related phenomena. He has spoken to audiences around the world about the implications of disclosure, the formal confirmation by heads of state of an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. He has given over 1,200 radio and television interviews, and PRG's advocacy work has been extensively covered by national and international media, including being featured on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, The Washington Post, and The New York Times. In 2013, PRG organized a citizen hearing on disclosure at the National Press Club in Washington. In November of 2014, PRG launched a 2-year political initiative out of Washington, D.C. that injected the ET issue into the 2016 presidential campaign. PRG recently launched a new exopolitical podcast out of Washington, D.C., The Disclosure Wire, based in the National Press Club building 2 blocks from the White House. Bassett has appeared in many documentary films, and his lectures and interviews are well represented on YouTube. PRG's main website is paradigmresearchgroup.org, and the Disclosure Wire podcast can be found at disclosurewire.org. For 20 years, Richard M. Dolan has been one of the best-known UFO researchers in the world, period. He is the author of several groundbreaking books in the field, opening up fresh ways of understanding this perplexing subject. His massive 2-volume history, UFOs and the National Security State, has permanently altered our understanding of the rich history of UFOs and the cover-up of this reality by government and military agencies around the world, and especially within the United States. He is also co-author of the classic book AD, After Disclosure, to this day, still the only book-length attempt to analyze the potential end of UFO secrecy and what that might mean for the world. His book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, remains the best single volume to discuss the full range of the UFO subject in all its complexity, written in clear and easy-to-understand prose. His most recent book, The Alien Agendas, is another unique contribution to the subject, being one of the few attempts to analyze the beings behind the UFO phenomena by examining the long history of our encounters with them. Aside from being one of ufology's most engaging writers, Richard has been in front of the camera and microphone for many years as well. He has spoken to audiences around the world and is host of The Richard Dolan Show, a usually weekly podcast for KGRA and his YouTube channel. He has appeared on countless television programs, including Ancient Aliens, Hangar 1, UFOs, The Lost Evidence, and many more. He also wrote and hosted the television series False Flags, which appears on Gaia TV. These days, Richard is engaged in writing his third volume of UFOs and the National Security State, bringing the history of UFOs up to the present day. Meanwhile, he manages his website, richarddolanmembers.com, which features fresh writing, video, and audio content by Richard every week. Now, I'm going to start our show tonight on a cautionary note. Given the depth and breadth of my two guests' combined knowledge regarding the matter at hand, their incredibly sharp intellects, high degree of familiarity with our subject, outstanding oratory skills, combined passions, and outspoken natures, I had to consider that, remote as the possibility might be, bringing these two men together here tonight might open a small tear, a small one, in the space-time continuum and result in Washington, D.C., Rochester, and Ithaca, New York, our dear producer Ray Harbs in Arkansas, and possibly the entire state of Ray is headquartered, being sucked into a wormhole and all of us disappearing forever. And then I thought, what the hell, let's give it a try. Richard Dolan, Steve Bassett, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Hi, Peter. Thanks so much. It's great to be on here with you and my old friend, Stephen.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good, Peter. Pretty good. Not bad material. You could write for a comedy program.
Thank you. Okay. I am. This is going to be a funny show. Just kidding. We're dealing with a very serious subject tonight, even with a bit of levity to start off. My thought was the first hour, I'm going to pose a series of questions to you two gentlemen, some to one or both. And then the second hour, do my best to moderate a dialogue between you. Viewers and listeners should be aware that there is a 3-minute break at the top of the hour, but otherwise we are basically heading into 2 hours with Richard Dolan and Steve Bassett. So, to the subject at hand, as early as tomorrow, but no later than the end of this month, the Pentagon will be releasing its long-awaited UFO-UAP report, at least the highly redacted, sanitized version that will be available to us civilians. Richard, will you start us off with an idea of why you feel that this very public and highly publicized action was initiated and at this particular moment in history?
Wow, great question. Well, this is the culmination of the last 3.5 years of forward motion. I mean, honestly, it's the culmination of even many more years prior to that of genuine activism and slow buildup of the UFO subject, but particularly the last 3.5 years of headway made by organizations like TTSA, To the Stars Academy, and their allies in the major media, people like Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, writing for the New York Times, George Knapp, who have been able to raise the profile publicly of the UFO subject in a way that it had never been done before. In terms of how this was actually done, you have the announcement of the Navy's UAP task force about a year ago. You have then President Donald Trump getting the report mandate slipped into the COVID relief bill last winter. Those details, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure if I have all of that down, and I'm not sure if anyone does yet. Probably someone does. I don't. But I think it's a very good thing that it's been promoted. I do think that there is going to be some serious issues with the amount of information that will be available in that report. I'm not saying it's going to be a big flop or dud, but I'm personally not expecting a major breakthrough with this particular report, although I'm glad it's happening. So I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Steve, anything you would like to add to that?
I can't hear.
Mr. Bassett, are you with us?
He's talking.
I'm learning how to unmute a mic. I've actually gone to tutorials. No, I've studied tutorials on this
a high-tech guy,
and I will eventually master this. A couple of things first. I want to burnish Richard's resume just a touch. First, since 2004, Paradigm Research Group has conducted 6 exopolitical conferences in the Washington, D.C. area, all connected to the press club one way or another, as well as a citizen hearing on disclosure in 2013. Richard is the only living person on the planet which is 7.4 billion people. Of all those 7.4, he is the only living person that spoke at all of them.
I have to interrupt here and ask you, are there any dead people that also fit into this category?
No.
Okay, continue on.
Okay. And then secondly, and Richard is many things. I mean, his resume is extensive. But you didn't mention something. I consider Richard to be the historian for this field.
Yes.
He is the resident historian for this field. I don't think anybody else is even close to being able to claim that. So you got that. And then also, I think it's legitimate to say he's a futurist. When you are in this issue and you spend a lot of time thinking about it, you think into the future, but inevitably you become a futurist. But you really got to write about it and go there, and he has. So he is a futurist and historian and everything else you said. Okay. And then lastly, I want to mention to the audience, I actually am sitting in front of the Capitol. That is the real Capitol behind me. And so if the Capitol Police should notice me, I may have to relocate. Won't take long. Just alerting you to that in advance. Okay, now, to answer your question, I have come up with a term, which is all mine. This is my term. Okay, I want to make that very clear. Welcome to use it. PayPal me 10 cents, 50 cents, whatever, but just keep in mind it's my term. This term, I'm going to dine on this puppy for the next 6 months, and it is this. What is going on right now? If you look at the big picture for the last 3.5 years, you just try to take the bigger picture, not get down into the weeds. What is going on right now is a public relations driven extrication project.
Oh.
Okay. Meaning that you take all the moving parts and all the people here and there and this and that, and there's a lot happening every day, and you just put it in a package. That's what it is. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's remarkable how many things that seem inscrutable suddenly become perhaps clear. Now, I should add to this that I have very few inside connections, very few people that are tapped into the inside. I didn't grow up living a life. And I was basically a tennis bum most of my life, and there was just no opportunity to connect with CIA people or anything like that. They never showed up. And so they don't play tennis anyway. They play golf. And so the point is that I do have a couple, and one of them let me know quite a few years ago that in the early aughts, the Department of Defense contracted out to one of the top public relations firms in Washington, D.C., whose name will go unmentioned now because they're still operating and they're not that far from me where I'm staying. And the task that they gave them was to run a complete analysis of how the government could disclose the extraterrestrial presence to the American people. I don't know how much it cost, but it took 5 years. And so that report, based on the time period that we're talking about, has been in the DOD's hands since about 10 years, which reinforces the fact that, one, those who need to know in our government have known about the ET presence since Roswell. 47 latest, period, fact, done deal. Two, the government has embargoed this issue from the American people. That is also a fact for the last 74 years. And three, I can assure you that our government, our DOD, our military intelligence community, which is made up of very smart people, very well funded with really good computers, have been analyzing every aspect of this field in terms of the politics, the sightings, the research, not to mention the crash vehicles, can't leave those out, and how to deal with the disclosure issue. This did not surprise them in 2017. Like, they're sitting there, oh my God, who knew? Oh, wow. You mean, you know what? No, of course not. Okay, well, if that's true, then what is happening? Well, what is happening, in my opinion, is this. When you've been misrepresenting something for national security reasons for 75 years, every single day, not just to each other, but to the American people and the world's people, along with the cooperation, And you've gone to great lengths to do it. It's a legal policy. Occasionally you got a little rough, but not too much. And then you suddenly realize circa 2017, October, December, 65 days, 2 events, boom, boom, one after the other, that the jig is up. It's over. It's just a matter of when you're going to have to fess up and acknowledge, yep, extraterrestrial. You know what you're going to do? You're going to think really, really hard on how you can do that and look as good as possible. How you can minimize blowback, pushback, how you can be a winner if possible, how you can also minimize disruption, confusion, and so forth. In other words, you're going to come up, and you're smart and you're clever, you're going to come up with a way to do this that is best for you and hopefully everyone else. We've all been there, okay? Every one of us has been there. We've done something really wrong. Well, and I'm not saying that this was wrong, that the truth embargo was illegal. I'm just saying we did something, oh boy. We lied to our parents about something huge, or we made a huge mistake, and we are aware that come next Thursday, we're going to have to tell mommy, daddy, employer, whatever. And so we spend that time between the present and that Thursday thinking, how can I relate this rather difficult information in a way that mitigates problems for me and makes me look good? Or to make the analogy even tighter, dear, I must tell you that I have been having an affair with your sister for the last 3 years, but I have booked a 3-month vacation in Europe for the 2 of us. It's kind of like that, okay? And then you hope for the best. So, under that aegis, I'm going to just make one other comment about the report. And that is this. My take on the report is straightforward. It is part of this extrication process. It is appropriate and it makes sense. Rubio and Warner figured this out. They put the language in the appropriation bill when it was submitted in June, knowing it wouldn't get signed until much later in the year. It was signed in December. That put the deadline into June. And if the agenda that I believe is happening, if the key to a proper extrication process that makes lots of winners, which is to hold congressional hearings for witnesses, lots of them, lots of hearings, big hearings with hundreds of millions of people watching, this report is ideal. The DOD is able to submit a reasonable report, nothing fantastic, but showing it's helping, adding a little here, adding a little there, submits it to the Intel Committee. Combine that with all the briefings that have been going on, all the way back to the ATIP program. Recently, Elizondo mentioned they were briefing people in Congress during the ATIP program. All those briefings preparing Congress for the inevitable. And you've made it even that much easier for key members of the committees, or ranking the chairs of the committees, to say, yeah, I think we need to have some hearings on this. And the DOD is a winner, as well as the Congress. That's my take.
Okay. Richard, question for you. And this is based on your best educated guess on what will differentiate the versions of this report released, the ones to the public at large and the version that will go out to those cleared to know in the world of officialdom.
Well, we don't know how many reports are going to be included in this study. So about a little more than a week ago, the New York Times wrote an article by which they had an anonymous insider who said there would be about 120 of these reports over the last, let's say, roughly 2 decades. And it wasn't really clear, how much of that would be in the classified component, how much of it would be public. I have no idea. I don't know anyone who really does know. I'm sure there are people who know. I don't know what they know. We know that there's going to be a classified component. Will there even be 120 of these reports? Right now, we're all speculating, and we just don't have the genuine information. Yeah. I would guess that, when Lou Elizondo issued his essentially a complaint along with Danny Sheehan not that long ago, this was done because it was Elizondo's opinion, or his judgment, that the people working on this report were completely out of their depth and not able really to conduct a proper investigation. I mean, look, you have 6 months' time even to get proper security clearances to go into some of this labyrinthian process of the Pentagon could take 6 months by itself. And that says, of course, nothing about the private contractors like Lockheed or TRW, Boeing, and the others, where it is a certainty. And I mean a certainty where any of the real hardcore information about crash retrievals, bodies, technology, all of that stuff that everyone who's looked into the UFO subject knows is there. Those private corporations have dominant control over the security of that. And I mean, I just think there's absolutely no way that the Pentagon Task Force people can get access to that, let alone, I mean, even the more you think, the Pentagon system itself, but that's very difficult. That's a very difficult system to get into. So Elizondo's complaint, backed by his attorney, Danny Sheehan, was predicated on this idea that, the task force is unlikely to be able to get much of anything, in his opinion. And then that prompted the response of the Inspector General's office of the Pentagon to perform a review of that process. And I was just talking with Danny about this a couple of days ago. And, I think there's a lot of concern that even the IG's office is not going to do much of a job in oversight of. So you've got concern that the task force itself is not really going to be able to get a whole lot. And then the concern that the Inspector General's office in its supposed oversight of the task force is also not really going to be able to do much of a job. That's the best information that I have right now. So in terms of being able to differentiate between the classified component and the public component, all we know is that there's going to be a difference. But I will say this. I do think, Steve makes some very good points. Like, what's happening is that a momentum, I mean, in just broad terms, a momentum is developing.
Yes.
In a way that, I mean, look, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I would not have expected. Maybe Steve expected. I didn't. But it's happening now, and it's substantial. The question that I have, though, is how far can this momentum actually go? And I just want to leave this. There are many. We're not dealing with a unified effort here. This is not a single unified disclosure effort. You've got an effort being led by what I firmly consider to be a faction within, among some prominent individuals who've got some good establishment connections, but they are a faction. And in fact, there have always been factions with the UFO subject. Going back to the 1950s, you read the books of Donald Kehoe. He talks about it. And there's a faction now, but they have, and this is a faction that has allies and it's got enemies. And you can see, like, for example, the enemies of this faction are Pentagon's Public Relations Office, Susan Gao, and her predecessors there, who at various times denied that Elizondo was even part of ATIP, who denied that ATIP had anything to do with UFOs, putting out these counter narratives. And you also see within the major media, there's definitely not a coordinated message that's coming out, in my view, anyway. And that also, has to do with the Pentagon itself. The Pentagon, generally speaking, in my observation, is not supportive of the efforts of what's going on right now with this task force. But there's not, they can't stop it entirely either. So they have to let this thing go. But I will say this, there are many fallback positions that they can play before they get into any kind of danger zone. The real danger zone for disclosure is admission that there's been a conspiracy, a cover-up. Yes. And the way, the red line that they will absolutely fight as the Alamo is the line of crash retrievals and acquisition of extraterrestrial technology. So before that, they can say a whole bunch of things that will basically keep this cover-up going indefinitely. And I believe that if they have their way, they'll keep this cover-up going for as many years as they possibly can. If they can do 5 more years, they'll do it. If they can do 50 more years, they will do that. If they could do 500 years, well, by golly, they would do that. That I don't think will be possible. But they can say things like, yes, Well, their current position is there are things out there and we don't know what they are. Now, that's actually kind of an amazing position. Just even a few years ago, we were not at that position. It was a few years ago, Steve organized the petition to the Obama White House on, UFO disclosure, and the Obama White House totally stonewalled it while the ATIP program was in existence. They just lied their heads off. So now we're at a place that's more advanced than that. So we have this admission from the Navy, if not from the White House.
Yes.
All of this promoted by Elizondo Mellon and TTSA, Tom Dolan, that yes, there's things out there. We don't know what they are. But there's a lot of other fallback positions. They can say things like, well, we've had quite a few encounters with these things. They're almost there now. They could say, well, we've studied some unusual artifacts, but we have no conclusions. Or they could say, some of these UFOs may have come from elsewhere, but we don't know anything about them. They could say, well, even going farther than that, well, we've known something about this for a long time, but we've kept quiet because we wanted to avoid panic.
Yes.
Like that's anything to avoid culpability and finger pointing at a conspiracy. Like they can say, well, we've had military encounters for years, but we still don't know much. There's like at least probably 10 intermediate positions that can be taken officially. I mean, even right now, we're at this quasi, very strange position in all of this where the United States Navy has said, yes, there's something going on, but there's still wiggle room. You don't have a confirmation from the office of the president. There's still no confirmation that these UAP, as they've now been rebranded, there's no confirmation that they are definitively unexplained. And you still have skeptics trying to make the case that these are Chinese or Russian drones. It's not a strong case, but there are people who make it. So all I'm saying is that we're not even now at a place of any kind of genuine confirmation.
Yeah.
There is room for this to be walked back. And by the way, I would say that the last two articles in the New York Times, which were not written by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, were indicative of a walk back type of attitude. And it takes us back to where the New York Times normally is, which is a less than mediocre position on UFOs. And
Correct.
I now believe that the only reason that the New York Times has had some good articles on this subject in the last few years is for two reasons. Reason number one is Leslie Kean, and reason number two is Ralph Blumenthal. They both clearly believe in UFOs. They both clearly fought to get those pieces in the New York Times as they did. And without those two individuals there, I think the New York Times is very obviously reverting to its old position. The last article by Helene Cooper and the other individual, twice they said well, UFOs doesn't necessarily mean alien. It's a definite walking back of where we've gone. So there's a lot of room for what I would call the establishment on this to retreat. And there's one more reason that I think they will do this, if there's any kind of coordination. I think that there's a desperate unwillingness to go forward with disclosure. We're moving into an era globally where the very phrase conspiracy theory has become such a smear in every possible way, to the extent that YouTube channels get increasingly deplatformed and shadow banned, Twitter, all of them. And conspiracy theories are one of the worst things. What would happen, seriously, if you have that same establishment roll out the truth that, well, don't believe in conspiracy theories, except, well, the UFO one, that's true. Like the UFO conspiracy is like the mother of all conspiracy theories. What is bigger? What's bigger than that? Nothing is bigger than the UFO cover-up or conspiracy. And so I really, in an era where we're clearly moving toward a digitally based totalitarian 24/7 control system, that is obvious. All right, in which only so-called authoritative sources of news and information are to be promoted and listened to. I just can't see how there would be any voluntary movement at all toward promoting a genuine UFO cover-up. So this whole movement that we've seen for the last 3.5 years, there was no initiative from the establishment on this, in my view. I think this was a very unwelcome development. and it was promoted by a private faction that has, we're talking Chris Mellon, we're talking Tom DeLonge, we're talking Hal Puthoff, we're talking Lou Elizondo, that crew, and their allies, George Knapp, Leslie Ralph, and so forth. That group, they basically had a grand slam home run in this, and they've put this now out for all of us. But this is not a welcome development from, at least in my view, from the upper establishment. So I think we can continue to see resistance, stonewalling, foot dragging, all of that. And it's true that, you've got Marco Rubio, Elizabeth Warren, there are others who are part of this. How far they will be able to push, that'll be interesting to see. How committed are they? I do, at least from Rubio's comments, he does seem to be, pretty, for a politician, for a senator, fairly forthright on this. But I'm skeptical that this is going to go particularly far, at least this year, or at least for a few years. There's a lot of in-between stages for this discussion to go before we get to an admission of acquisition of exotic technology and a long-standing cover-up of this subject. And I just don't think that will go over well. And once you get to the admission of long-standing, acquisition of, let us say, an intact flying saucer or crash flying saucer or anything like that, that's when you get into the danger zone of an avalanche effect of this coming out from a variety of sources, where there's the danger of losing control, and that will not be an orderly process, quite possibly. And how we come out of that will be interesting indeed.
Richard, before asking Steve to expand on what you've just said, it's fair to say that included in that acquisition of exotic technology, crash retrievals, in the same category would certainly be putting abductions, hybrids.
Yes. Yep. That's down the road. That's very important.
Yeah. Steve, would you expand on what Richard just laid out for us?
Peter, your show is not even remotely long enough to do that. I could start from right now, and then Richard and I could go back and forth for 4 solid hours. I tried to get us doing exactly that a while back. I had a pretty high-level person that literally had gotten the New School in New York to provide their auditorium, which is like a famous auditorium, for us to come in and do a whatever dialogue about all the things that he just said. Okay. When the New School top people found out the subject matter, they killed it. So we never had that. I predict in the not too distant future, Richard and I are going to take what he just said, and we're going to go on a stage in front of some very high level people with degrees, and things like that. And we're going to have so much fun, you can't believe it. But I'm going to step back here because I know that the report coming up is very much on the mind of all of your viewers and listeners. And so I want to get back to that a little bit, help them out. And here's how I'm going to do it. I don't think that many people that are watching or listening tonight have actually read the language in the Defense Intelligence Appropriations Bill. Now, I'm not going to read it all, but I think it would be helpful if they had a little more of a sense of it. So I am now bringing it up on my computer here.
Good.
And I'm going to just grab some pieces of it, right? First of all, your viewers and listeners need to know that this language was not put in the legal enumerated area of the act. It was in the comment section. It's not a legal binding matter, but it is a request from the Senate Intelligence Committee, and one dismisses requests from the Senate Intelligence Committee with, how would you say, risk, all right? And so, very quickly, I'm going to skip over a lot. Therefore, the committee directs the DNI in consultation with the Secretary of Defense and the heads of such other agencies as the director and secretary jointly consider relevant to submit a report. It doesn't say research report. It says a report within 180 days of the enactment of the act, which didn't occur until December, thus putting the deadline in June. Okay, so if it's not a research report, what is it? Here is basically what it is. It's spelled right out. The committee further directs the report to include a detailed analysis. This is the key word. It is an analysis. It is not a research effort. They don't have to go and study all the evidence for the ET issue going back to 1947 of unidentified aerial phenomena data and intelligence reporting collected or held by the Office of Naval Intelligence. Well, that confines it to the Office of Naval Intelligence, doesn't it? It's not saying collected by all of the agencies, including the Air Force, kind of limits it, no problem. Number two, a detailed analysis of unidentified phenomena data collected by geospatial intelligence, signals intelligence, human intelligence, measurement and signals intelligence. Okay, fine. Three, a detailed analysis of data of the FBI, which is derived from investigations of intrusions of unidentified aerial phenomena data over restricted airspace. Okay, a detailed description of the interagency process. Number five, identification of an official accountable for the office of the process described in paragraph 4. Identification of potential aerospace or other threats. This is very important and had to be in here by the unidentified aerial phenomena to national security. 7, identification of any incidents or patterns that indicate a potential adversary. And 8, recommendations regarding increased collection of data. So, what are we talking about here? It's a relatively open request covering a number of areas. It's an analysis, not deep research, and it most definitely puts an emphasis on the potential military aspects of this, national security aspects of this. Why? Because the Senate Intelligence Committee, which has people on there that have been there for 30 years or whatever the hell, just realized that maybe the phenomena could be a national security issue? Please. They already know that. So why bother to put this request in there? Well, because, this is brilliant on the part of Rubio and Warner, by putting the request in there and giving it 180 days deadline meant that this thing was going to be out for 6 months. And guess what? Marco Rubio has got a ton of publicity out of this. He's been all over the media in a nonpartisan way, not part of the crazy politics, right? Good for him. Brilliant strategy, by the way. He wasn't at risk. He wasn't running for election in 2020. And it puts the national security aspect out there in the public. And what has happened in the last 6 months? Expectations have risen around the country. People are excited. Social media, it's all over the place. Scores of articles have been written about the phenomena, just not the request for this report, but the phenomena in general. I'm chronicling them. I've got nearly 1,000 articles already earmarked on my print media archive, specifically addressing the To the Stars Academy and all the subsequent events. The media coverage is unprecedented in history. Nothing has ever even come close to this. And I've read it all because I have no life. Okay, so what they've set up is a report that will come back to address these various things, but in particular, the national security aspect. Why is that important? Because there are plenty of people in Congress that know about the ET presence. Believe me, there are a lot of people there. They're not stupid, they're well connected, and they can read books too and watch documentaries. But what they've set up is for the DOD to present a report that will obviously raise the national security issue. And why is that important? Because if you are the chairman of a committee, the key committees, the 7 big ones, House and Senate Intel, House and Senate Armed Services, House and Senate Homeland Security, and the House Science Technology Committee, and you're going to risk holding hearings on this issue with military witnesses coming in that are going to be watched by hundreds of millions of people, that's a good thing. They love being on camera with big audiences. You need a platform in which to do it. And I assure you, no one was going to agree to hearings, no matter how many briefings they got from Mellon or Elizondo or the witnesses, if the premise for the hearings is, let's meet and decide how we're going to build the ET embassy to welcome the extraterrestrials when they finally show up. That hearing is never going to happen. but a national security-based hearing addressing the potential threat is perfect to hold those hearings, which is why I think those hearings are coming very, very soon. And so that is how I view the report. That is the language that requested it. It was no accident. The people that made the request already knew the key elements of it, which brings me to a very important article. The New York Times, November 3. This article is very significant, and I encourage people to read it. In this one, it was written by Julian Barnes and Helene Cooper. A lot of people don't know Helene Cooper has an extraordinary background. Defense, Pentagon correspondent, she's heavy duty. Julian Barnes is also in that area. So these two people that are writing this article, June 3, have very substantial journalistic credentials in military, defense, and so forth. It's titled, U.S. Finds No Evidence of Alien Technology in Flying Objects, but Can't Rule It Out Either. And I believe that the initial headline was not quite that, and they actually had to change it. And the exact reasons are not clear, but the second headline is better. And when you read this article, I'm not going to go read it, here is what you find in the middle of this article. The Department of Defense leaked, quote unquote, to somebody at the New York Times who knew that information regarding what was going to be in the report. There was some confusion about whether it was the classified portion or the unclassified portion. I don't think it matters, because I think this is going to be in the unclassified portion, but there may be aspects. And the New York Times is not going to publish that leak unless it knows it is rock solid, I assure you. And what did this leak say? The Department of Defense does not have evidence at this point indicating an extraterrestrial explanation for the phenomena we've been hearing so much about. Now, let me be clear. That is an outright lie. Of course, the Department of Defense has evidence for that, just because it's not in the front office or part of the press releases they put out. But it's a lie. But it is a lie in service to this public relations extrication process, which is another way of saying the government must lie its way out of the big lie. And I'm happy with that. I'm happy that they do that. Whatever gets us there, okay? And so there's no evidence for extraterrestrials. However, the Department of Defense has determined, and it's unequivocal in this article, that the phenomena that has been demonstrated in these gun camera clip footages and other statements by people such as Elizondo does not represent any technology that the United States has, which is probably also a lie, because I have pretty high confidence that we have some anti-gravitic craft. Now, whether they're as cool as the ET craft, I don't know, but based upon some of the sightings of these, they're not bad. So that's also a lie. It's okay. I have no problem with that.
Steve,
so let me finish here. Let me finish. This is critical. So let me make a very important point. The United States government has the most advanced technology of any country in the world, equal to or better than any other country in the world, period. China, Russia, Soviet Union, Canada, France, Brazil, Peru, I don't care. It has the most advanced technology. Therefore, that technology cannot be human-made. They have essentially said, any leak to the New York Times, it's extraterrestrial without saying it's extraterrestrial. I hope people read this article and think about that, because it doesn't take a lot of three-dimensional chess to figure out what's going on down there. They're not stupid people. They know what they're doing. Just like when Obama announced through the Office of Science Technology Policy in response to PRG's petition, there was no evidence whatsoever for any extraterrestrial presence, and there's no evidence the government has ever hid anything. This was such an obvious, pronounced lie that I am convinced to this day it was intentional. The White House couldn't in any way sort of acknowledge maybe there's some truth to this petition's request for disclosure. They couldn't help in that regard. But Obama, who I happen to believe is well aware of what's going on, already tied to the Clintons, did the best he could. He put out a statement so obviously false, it could only help the disclosure process. I'm done.
Richard, before I ask you to follow up in any way that you'd like on Steve's comments, bearing in mind that we have less than 10 minutes before our break, Louis Elizondo's name has come up a number of times so far, and most appropriately. For our viewers and listeners who are not familiar with Louis, would you give them a capsule description of who he is, his background, and why he's so important in this story?
Sure. Luis Elizondo, he said he's worn a couple of important hats before he even joined the To the Stars Academy with Tom DeLonge and that gang. So he's probably most famous for having run the ATIP program. So that's the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. That's the UFO program that we learned about in 2017. And that was charged with attempting to gather whatever relevant data it could on the UAP subject that it could for a number of years. The other thing, though, about Lou Elizondo is that he, and this is only something that we recently learned, I think this came out through John Greenwald's Black Vault, he ran security in the organization SAPOG, that Special Access Program Oversight Committee. Lou Elizondo in the Pentagon apparently ran all security, at least for some time, of all of the special access programs that were out of the Pentagon. Very significant, very significant. So, in other words, this is an intelligence officer who's had some sensitive positions within the Pentagon, not just the UFO piece, but the special access program piece. They're both very important. And what we have known, this is what Lou has said, and I still have not found any reason to dispute this. In 2017, he was dissatisfied with the manner in which the UFO subject was being handled within the Pentagon, quit his job, left, and joined up with TTSA. And that whole thing started in October 2017, where they had their press conference. And it was also Lou Elizondo, along with Chris Mellon, who were instrumental in getting the 3 videos declassified out of the Pentagon. That's the Tic Tac, the Go Fast, and the Gimbal UFO video that skeptics still like to argue about. I personally think the Tic Tac UFO video is quite interesting indeed, but they're all significant. And he was involved in getting that out. And of course, ever since then has been pretty much at the forefront. Publicly, he's been the face of this disclosure effort. He's been accused of being a counterintelligence disinformation officer, doing a PSYOP, trying to scare up the public by talking about things like a potential threat. I think these criticisms are absolute nonsense.
Yep.
Couldn't be more wrongheaded, but some people disagree with me. They just, but yeah, so I think this is what Lou Elizondo's been about, to answer your question.
Thank you.
If I have a minute to follow up, or
please.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Steve, for reading out the mandate of what the task force is supposed to do. And I'm not going to repeat it. People can play it back later. But I can't see that they're going to be able to get this job done at all. So their mandate is to, analyze all the sources from, gather the UFO data from all of these different sources of information within the Navy and beyond the Navy, to analyze, do a sophisticated analysis of potential threats and all the rest. Like, you can't do that if you're not really getting enough information. And it remains to be seen if they're really going to get access to the information that they need. One of the things in that article, by the way, thank you for mentioning the name Julian Barnes. I couldn't remember his name. He's the co-author with Helene Cooper. Yeah, the original title of that piece was simply that there's no evidence that it's extraterrestrial, but then they added, but they can't rule it out. And the reason I think they had to change that is because it just came across, I think, as too over-the-top skeptical debunking. Yeah. And they made that amendment. It is true, like when you read the text of that article, when you get past their gratuitous statements that UAP doesn't necessarily mean alien, when you look at what they're actually saying, it's absolutely true. Like, they don't have evidence that it's Russian or Chinese, and I think that was in the article. They don't have evidence that it's U.S. black budget tech, and they don't have evidence it's extraterrestrial. But that could actually, all of those reasons could be because they very likely have not looked at enough evidence. Like, it's really not clear to me that this is a task force that in any realistic way could succeed in its mandate of getting access to the information it's supposed to get to. I mean, if they, in the best of all possible worlds, like a perfect world, they'd have a bunch of guys, a bunch of men and women analyzing this with funding and with clearances to get into all of these departments. Whether that's really going to happen, I'm just going to take a wild guess. The answer is no. And I'm going to take a wild guess that they're going to have a lot of frustrations, that this may not be the end. There could be follow-up investigations, like maybe what we'll get at the end of June. I'm guessing we're not going to see this for at least a week, I would think. But whenever it happens, it's possible that to assuage the disappointment to the public, which many people are probably expecting a lot out of this, you might hear, well, this is just a start. We're going to continue and see what more we can learn through subsequent investigation. Maybe that will be what we get. And I'm not speaking from any inside knowledge of this. I'm just taking a guess that might be possible. I mean, the worst case scenario is that they do a kind of a Condon committee on us. And, in other words, that was from 1968, where you have this allegedly scientific study of UFOs. The whole thing was a rigged game. And Edward Condon, who's running it, says, there's no evidence that there's anything really important about this. We should just let the whole thing go. I'm hoping that will not be the case. I can't think that is the case. Steve rightly pointed out the massive media crescendo we have seen. There's never been anything like this. I agree 100% with Steve on this. There's just nothing. There's been UFO journalism back in the 1950s and in the 1960s. There were periods where there was a lot. Now, from the 70s onward, not so much. It's been at least 50 years, more than 50 years since the United States and the world, just anywhere in the world, has seen such extended coverage of the UFO subject. And even compared with those earlier years in the 50s and 60s, I think firmly that we have easily surpassed what happened in the old days. And that's simply because you're not getting any snark. You're not getting much snark anymore. And you are actually getting not just the major media. I mean, every time Lou Elizondo goes on Tucker Carlson, I'm like holding my breath, just waiting for the next bombshell. 2 years ago, Elizondo says to Carlson on national television that there are crash retrievals of UFOs. And then they ended the interview and no follow-up. But not only the major media, like one cut below, if you go to a lot of like mainstream-ish YouTube channels, there's a lot of information on UFOs coming out and some very intelligent conversations. Everything's at baby steps here. I mean, just the tiniest of baby steps. Is there something out there? Are there aliens? There's no conception of the long history of this phenomenon. You still hear people saying things like, well, the Tic Tac's probably black budget. I'm thinking, you know what? We've had Tic Tac reports going back to the 1950s, 40s, and yes, 1930s. I found one myself. Tic Tac UFO 1936 in the middle of nowhere in Canada. And this phenomenon has just been going for a long time. And in fact, I was just shown an 1892 report off the southern coast of California, where the Tic Tac of 2004 was found, of a Tic Tac described UFO in 1892. I think those things probably live there. We're not even close to a genuine historical understanding of this. And the main thing that I would like to see, if we ever have hearings on this, like Steve was talking about congressional hearings, Senate hearings, yes, that would be wonderful. What we really need to be getting at is how do we get through the labyrinth of the Pentagon, the Department of Energy, which I don't hear anyone talking about, and there's a long history of UFO information hidden away there. And, from everything that I've been able to learn about the DOE, that is one hell of a secretive organization. And there's a serious UFO connection there. And then also the CIA. Each of those three have their own special access program structure, separate from each other, from what I understand. And we're not even, at the beginning steps of figuring out, where is this stuff? 2 years ago, a document leaked out, notes by Dr. Eric Davis of his interview with Admiral Thomas R. Wilson. I was kind of at the center of a lot of that controversy for a while, simply for one reason, is that I was shown that document back in 2006. I've known about it all this time, and other people have as well, incidentally. And, if someone were to study the detailed text of that conversation that Davis, thank goodness, wrote this down in his conversation with retired Admiral Thomas Wilson, who was deputy head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs back in 1997, when he was denied access to a private, probably Lockheed, operation to reverse engineer alien tech. This is a huge story. Anyway, if you study the notes there, that is probably our best first attempt to get into the labyrinth. In this case, the Pentagon's labyrinth.
And Richard, I'm going to have to cut you off right there. I'm sorry to say. This is Peter Robbins with Meanwhile Here on Earth with my guests tonight, Richard Dolan and Stephen Bassett. Richard's website is richarddolanmembers.com. Steve's main website is paradigmresearchgroup.org. Disclosure Wire podcast, disclosurewire.org. We're back in 3 minutes. See you on the hour.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan.
Hello, and welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth with me, your host, Peter Robbins, and my special guests for tonight, Richard M. Dolan and Stephen Bassett. Gentlemen, I am about to turn you loose on each other. I know you will play fair. Be nice. Remember, we still risk exploding the space time continuum, so don't get too fired up. It's wonderful having you on the show, truly. You're both such dear friends and the two best people I could think of for this show at this moment in time. Let me ask you right now to please consider returning sometime, in the next few months to just continue this dialogue. I think I'd like to just keep it as a regular, irregular feature if you can come up with anything new to say. So work on it.
If we can come up with anything new to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I
feel
take that as a challenge, Peter.
I feel I have done a very good job so far at coaxing you two wallflowers out of your shells, and being social and coming up with things to say for our audience. So I take particular pride in this show. A big hug to you both. Is there anything particular you'd like to chat about?
Well, I'm up. It's my turn.
Go ahead.
Okay. And
a couple of things. First of all,
good. You can take me
I want to say that KGRA just gets better and better and better. I mean, it is really operating at a high level. I mean, it's like the pros in New York. It's that good. I mean, the graphics, the intro, everything is handled. It's a very impressive operation. I've just watched it grow over the many years. Okay, have that out of the way. Now, let me first finish up something regarding the report. I'm going to offer a counter theory to Richard's on this. Let's imagine that the task force set up at the O&I, which I understand consists of one person and a janitor, I know, that cleans up at night, that's about it, was not actually set up to investigate anything, right? But it was set up, right, to receive a report request, okay? Let's assume that for a second. Let's assume that the reason for this report is not to get the DOD or anybody else to really do a significant investigation at all, because as Richard points out quite clearly, if you want to investigate the history of the ET issue with respect to our government, I think it's about a 2-year project. It would involve a team. It would cost several millions of dollars. So it clearly isn't that. I'm suggesting that all of this is an orchestrated process in order to get to a goal, and the goal is hearings. And another analogy I'd like to use. Think of some prominent people suddenly turn up in town and they're walking down the street carrying a banner, proclaiming something, whatever, something important. People are watching from the side, from the street side, going, who is it? I know that person. I recognize that person. And so they step off the sidewalk and get behind them. And then they continue on down. And as they go through town, the crowd grows and grows and grows until it's a real parade. But it only started with a few people. Think of what the TTSA did like that. They stepped out onto the street October 11th, 2017, with their resumes, raised high, and their gravitas and their credentials and their intentions and their mission statement, and started walking down the street. And people were watching them. They weren't just jumping in, no, but they were going, whoa, that's interesting. And what was their first stop on this little venture? The New York Times. They provided the information. The Times vetted it, and they generated those 2 stories. And then people started paying attention, and they started stepping off the sidewalk and joining them. And so what you have had over this last 3 months is an initially orchestrated project, not formally by the DOD or any agency. This was generated within the military intelligence complex by like-minded people who felt the truth embargo needed to end. They talked about it over lunch, drinks after work, or whatever. They were not meeting in conference rooms. This was an internally generated operation by people supporting the truth who were willing to take an extraordinary risk that they certainly could not take while under the employ of the government. And so what happened is, what emerged was a non-governmental organization, NGO, special, what do you call it? Corporate benefits company with a mission statement and a nice website. And those people, no longer under the employ of the government, still under NDAs, they could go to the New York Times when they couldn't have when they were working for the government, which explains why Luis Elizondo didn't go to the New York Times while he was running ATIP back in 2010.
Can I jump in, or what's our rules here?
And you can jump in any time.
Well, I would like to jump in and just, you're talking about this as an orchestrated process. And when this all began in 2017, I wondered the same thing. Is this an orchestrated process? Is this a form of controlled disclosure? That was a phrase that I was using at that time. And I genuinely wondered that this might be the case. I mean, particularly when you get something coming out in the New York Times, which is the Pravda of the, modern United States. Basically, it's the voice of the establishment. And,
ouch.
But by the way, I have to take issue with your earlier statement that the New York Times doesn't put anything else out unless they totally vet. Steve, you got to be kidding me. The New York Times has put out so much nonsense and lies from unvetted sources over the last decade. I couldn't even begin. But let's just say that their sources on this were legit. Okay, fine. But the real question is this an orchestrated process? You're saying for military intelligence. I see no evidence for this yet. So I don't know who these people would be. I maintain that what we're not seeing is an orchestrated process, but rather a fight. I think we're seeing a battle. And I don't know how this battle is going to turn out. It's interesting. It's very dramatic. And again, to me, the evidence points to the fact that you've got, essentially what we're really seeing is the modern version of the old aviary that's still duking it out. For those who don't know UFO history, the aviary was a collection of guys in the UFO field with high-level security clearance back in the 1980s that were talking about UFOs, obsessed really with UFOs. One of them was Hal Puthoff, he's the only one all through the years who has maintained, like all through the years with Robert Bigelow's National Institute of Discovery Science. That was the later incarnation of the aviary, in my opinion. And then you get it, through the ATIP years, and new people come on in. Eric Davis comes in. You had Kit Green back in those days. You had John Alexander, Jacques Vallée. You've lots of folks. They come and go. New people come in, but it's essentially the same. It's the same kind of organization. But I believe that what we're seeing is an initiative by these individuals. Now, they very probably have their own ulterior motives. Everyone does. We're human beings, not angels, and they probably want something else. But I think some of them genuinely want to see some openness on UFOs. Now, I'm sure there's a lot more than just idealism going on here. But the fact is they've got enemies. And I actually think it's dangerous to see this as an orchestrated process coming from within military intelligence, if only because that it gives people an idea that there's actually no agency from independent citizens and that everything's coming from within, the Washington Beltway. And I'm just not sure that's so. And by the way, someone's just messaging me that Sagar and Jetty and Rising just got canceled from The Hill. And I haven't confirmed this, but I have a video link here on my phone that says that's interesting because Sagar and Jetty, who actually have been following for the last couple of years, is one of those kind of just below the level of high level mainstream media that has been very sympathetic to the UFO story. On Rising on The Hill, I watched him with Crystal Ball for quite some time now. And Sagar was very, very interested in his UFO developments. And I cannot confirm it, but I have what I think is a good source who's telling me that they just got canceled. There's a video that explains it. And I have a link here. I just haven't had a chance to look at it. So I'm not really sure that we're looking at this central, controlled, coordinated, orchestrated process that you're talking about. And to me, that's a central way to interpret this. Like, is this orchestrated from inside, or are we dealing with an outside-ish, let's say, faction that is fighting for this and that could easily fail? And I tend to think it's the latter of this. I think it's an outside faction, and they can fail. They may not fail, but they might fail. So I don't think that this is a done deal. And I do think that there's a lot of resistance on the other side that still does not want to see this go through. I'll let you take it.
Look, I need to clarify here. I may not have stated it artfully enough. I do not think this is an orchestrated project.
That was your phrase. So I'm just working off of it.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to clarify for you, Richard. I do not think it's an orchestrated formal project by by the DOD or the CIA or any of these entities. I happen to believe that when this thing was announced, most of the military intelligence complex was caught by surprise.
Yeah, I think the same thing.
There was some heads up.
An unwelcome surprise at that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's unwelcome for those that want the truth contained, and welcome by those that don't. We've always had allies within the military intelligence complex that favor the truth coming out. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't formal. The only clues that they might have picked up on was the March 26th interview between George Knapp and Tom DeLonge in 2016, where Tom just went on for 4 hours about something happening without getting into specifics and names. But I don't think they saw that. And the WikiLeaks dump by Assange just for the election clearly indicated that something was going on between Tom DeLonge and Podesta. In other words, he'd approached them, not the Republicans. But if they weren't aware of the Knapp interview, they might not know what to make of that. And then,
what you saw though with that, I want to keep going. But all that I could see is that was a one-way conversation. I was really DeLonge talking to Podesta. I'm not aware of Podesta really engaging.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he may have behind the scenes, but I don't see that.
Well,
and I don't know how engaged Podesta really was.
If you go to my blog, I actually have a blog piece in there in which I listed all of the 92 emails dealing with ET issue that were revealed, and with commentary. And in fact, there was not only stuff going back, but Podesta sat down for an interview on camera with DeLonge. He also introduced a couple of insiders to.
But I don't think we have a record of what was said during that interview, do we? I don't believe
the interview's never been released. Yeah, and so the election went another way, and this whatever project was in the works was kind of hung out to dry.
But I think you're over interpreting the forward motion that Podesta and Hillary Clinton's campaign had on this issue. Like, I've always disagreed with you on this. We've had private conversations about this. I've never believed, you can believe, and other people have believed, that Hillary Clinton was going to be some kind of disclosure president. I never for an instant believed that. And I personally only interpreted Podesta's promotion of UFOs with Hillary as a very astute political movement, because Podesta realized the UFO subject was no longer the third rail of politics, and that it would be helpful for Hillary just to make her seem a little more cool with the public to say, yeah, UFOs are all right. I actually I don't see evidence that they would ever have really promoted a genuine disclosure, and I'm not sure that I see a lot of evidence that Podesta was genuinely engaging with DeLonge's earlier group, when he had McCaslin and Air Defense and Robert over at Lockheed, Robert Weiss over at Lockheed. I'm not seeing a lot of evidence that Podesta was engaging. If you've got it, then great, I will stand corrected. But I am not aware that Podesta was truly saying, yes, we're going to do this.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree on that. One of the reasons I feel so strongly about
the answer is in the evidence and what it is. And if Podesta has said something, then great. I just don't know what that is. I haven't seen it. If you've got it on your website, then that is my oversight.
Again, one of the reasons that Podesta said anything at all was because of a project that I was undertaking in Washington, D.C., which started in early December of 2015. My publicist, who's a legend in this town, I actually had enough money to pay her, and we started pushing the ET connection to Clinton into the media over town, and we started.
That was important work you did.
Yeah, we started generating articles. Okay, which is, I was hoping to explode the story out. You know how it is, the media feeds and feeds, and so, so we got it going. There was articles in the Washington Times and elsewhere, but it was still just the very first articles.
And you never got the credit. I'm just going to keep interrupting. You didn't, and you should have. You actually did a lot of the work that when Mother Jones did their whole thing on Hillary, and all that groundwork was really done by you.
A lot of people don't know this backstory, but I mean, it's important, Richard, because this backstory very much supports the premise that I've put out there. And part of that story that I'll mention now was this. Once the first articles came out, and we, in other words, when you go in a project like this, you just don't send out some notes you actually try to engage these reporters. And my publicist, who knows everybody in town, was setting up the meetings and I'm talking to them. And so you get into what is called a source relationship. You're not just sitting around waiting for somebody to call you an article. You're actually interacting and feeding them stuff, and then they write or they don't write. So I started developing source relationships with reporters, eventually topped out at 42 after, 17 months. So anyway, in the early days when these articles were written, the reporters were calling me back and saying, look, we tried to reach out to Clinton and Podesta because when you're writing an article about a candidate running for president that refers to them with an ET connection, and you're with the Washington Times or the Post or anybody, you contact them for comment. You just don't publish it. And what they were telling me was interesting. They said they will not return our call. They will not respond at all. No comment, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, to any reporter says, you're onto something here, okay? And so what I understood very quickly was that no later than early February, John Podesta knew
2016 we're talking now? February
2016. 15.
Okay. Yeah, you were doing this early.
John Podesta already knew the wolves were at the door. This idiot activist Bassett will never let us go. He's not going to go away. He won't just.
So he made the best of the situation.
And so he knows the wolves are at the door. And they're not going to stop, and this story's going to grow. What does he do? He cannot take a reporter's call and say, okay, what do you want to know? He couldn't do any of that, and they didn't. What he had to do was shape a response to this issue by the campaign that would show the press, I'm not totally oblivious to this. I understand what's going on, but not enough to ignite the damn thing and make it perhaps a problem for the campaign.
Exactly.
And the very first thing he did was remarkable. Okay. Now understand, this happens in February the 13th, 2015, approximately 6 weeks after we started engaging the press in Washington to get some stories going. All right. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the most remarkable things that happened in that campaign. I consider it historical. And it goes like this. For whatever reason, it was never clear. In the 7th year of Obama's term, he suddenly entreats Podesta to resign as the CEO of the Center for American Progress, which he founded and funded, and leave that job and come over and be an advisor to the president, direct advisor to the president in the White House.
To Obama, you're saying.
To Obama.
Yeah.
And none of the journalists in this town had the slightest idea what the hell that was about. Advise him on what? What, was he short of advisors? Okay. Well, I know why he brought him in. He brought him in because if you're an advisor to the president, you can talk about anything you want. No press release, absolutely safe. We do know from the records that he made a lot of trips to the White House. All right. And so he was there for 14 months. We also know, because Leslie Kean said so, that she actually went to the White House to, quote, meet with Podesta and possibly also with the president. We sort of know that. Okay. And so this goes on. No big deal. Didn't garner
Leslie said she met with Podesta and at least in 2015.
I saw an interview that she did go to the White House and meet at some point there. And I think while he was there, I believe, I could be wrong on that. It might have been afterwards, but I think it was during the time he was there. And he left on February the 13th. Okay, so we know that. And so now, after all this time, it's time for, these articles are turning up. Anyway, it's time for him to leave. So he's leaving his job as an advisor to the president. Everything he said and did there is under the Presidential Records Act. We're not going to find out about it until 12 years after Obama leaves office. And he's about to become the chairman of the woman who was virtually a lock to be president.
Right.
A fairly important job. And so naturally, on the way out the door, his last tweet from his White House account was the famous regret tweet, which is easy to find.
Hashtag disclosure.
He says, and this thing is just pregnant, okay? He says, my biggest regret for 2014, referring to the time he was advisor to the president, was once again not getting hashtag disclosure of the UFO files, hashtag the truth is still out there, copy Marine Doubt. Now, most people, most journalists that saw that tweet probably thought it was interesting. Most citizens that saw it had no idea what that tweet was about, but I did. Let me parse it for you, okay? Let me show you how important this tweet was. First.
Yeah, this is the end of 2014.
No. This is February the 13th, 2015.
Okay, early.
As he's leaving to become the chairman of her campaign.
Right. Yeah.
White House account, last tweet. Once again, what is he referring to?
And this is also during, you were doing a lot of publicity work at this very time to promote this issue.
Oh, God, I was doing everything I could.
As you were saying, there was just stonewalling up to that point. Doesn't it seem that Podesta, and this is really, you can take credit for this in my view, Podesta is essentially saying, all right, we can't really ignore this anymore.
Correct.
So we're going to deal with this.
I forced him.
But we're going to deal with it in a very careful, managed way, which is what they did, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I forced him out of cover. They didn't look. I've never gotten a Christmas card or an invite to any cocktail parties from anybody remotely connected to the Clintons. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I'm an activist. My job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Okay. And you're comfortable, so you watch it. And so here's the deal. Okay. He is alluding to the fact that during the Rockefeller Initiative, when he was an advisor to Bill Clinton in the White House, they tried
back to the 90s people.
Files.
Yes, exactly.
That was the first time. Okay. Now he says, but once again, well, wait a minute. That means that he did it again. When would they have tried to do it again? Well, it had to be while he was advisor to the president in 2014. He's basically admitting that while he was there, he was trying to get some files while he was working in the White House with Obama. He made another run at it. I don't know what the intent was, whether it was a preemptory, it was a prelude to what Clinton was going to do, whatever. I'm just saying they tried again, and obviously they failed. So in other words, they stonewalled Clinton. They just stonewalled Obama, and Podesta was involved in both. So he says, okay, once again, not getting #disclosure. Why didn't he just say disclosure? Why not just say disclosure of the UFO files? Why did he say #disclosure?
It's Twitter.
Well, let me tell you. You probably heard me say this, Richard, but we got a bigger audience here. Here's the deal. When I arrived in Washington in late November, it was after delivering a 30-hour set of all of the entire citizen hearing on disclosure to every single office, all 540. 5,440 discs. Let me tell you, it was a project. Ron James did this with me. It was a monumental effort. So we delivered that. But while they were in the mail, I did something bad. I was a bad boy. It's called good trouble. Okay, I did some good trouble. All right. There was a very large Facebook group called the Disclosure Lobby with thousands of members, and we went to this lobby and we said, "Look, we want to do a tweet storm." I never thought in my whole life up until that time that I would ever do a tweet storm, I can assure you. And what is a tweet storm? It's when you did what we did. I provided them the handles for all of the key committee members on the 7 key committees, as well as almost every political journalist that had a Twitter account in Washington, D.C. And from late November to February of 2015, we hit them with 2.5 million tweets. That's a lot of tweets. Some people were not happy. There was blocking going on, but whatever. We rained down on them that the discs are being delivered. The citizen hearing is happening. We want congressional hearings. We want disclosure.
Are you saying there were actually over 2 million tweets that were
between
generated?
2 and 2.5 million tweets. Yeah. Okay. So
that's a lot of tweets. I don't know how you generated that many, but
there was like 2,000 people involved. Some of them were working 8 hours a day, and they had the handles. It was a Henry Ford, assembly line, whatever. So
okay.
Believe me, they're still.
Are you hiring foreign nationals, or did you have like a large hired group of people that were just tweeting for you?
All volunteer, my friend. All volunteer. No
That's
Russians.
Amazing. 2,000 volunteers.
We screened the Russians out. No Russians were involved in this tweet storm.
They're usually out of India, but anyway, be that as it may, it's not Russia.
And so everybody that was tweeted was told
Okay.
By the way, when we started, I think that, you remember the word count was lower and then it got whatever the hell. The point is everybody was told, look, if you can do it, please put hashtag disclosure in these tweets. And by the way, John Podesta was on the list. And so for months, 2 months,
he's getting
hashtag
slammed.
disclosure tweets are raining down in Washington. So he puts hashtag disclosure in there to send a message. I hear you.
Yeah.
Hashtag disclosure of the UFO files. The truth is still out there. Copy Maureen Dowd. Now, how many people in the United States would have known why he copied, of all people, that one person, Maureen Dowd, in that tweet?
Probably very few.
You know. I think you do know, Richard, don't you?
How many?
Never mind. I don't want to do that. I want to put you in a spot. Look, I'm saying that here is why he copied Maureen Dowd. Back in 1997, when the Pentagon was under endless pressure, Corso's book the day after Roswell, Stephen Schiff is trying to get the files from Roswell, and the Army told him, we lost them all. He's not happy. And then you've got the anniversary coming up, 50th anniversary, Time magazine. There could be 200,000 people in Roswell. And of course, Clinton had been trying to get the files, which forced them to put out that Air Force report by Sheila Widnall that cost $12 million that basically said it's a mogul balloon, your taxpayer dollars at work there. And then there was the bodies, and the bodies, and they said, oh my God, so they hold this press conference right before the Roswell anniversary at the Pentagon. And that is when Colonel Haynes came out and gave the legendary review of the mogul balloon evidence, which was spectacular. And then said,
particularly bad, and it's available on YouTube. Anyone can
watch it. And then he said, as for the bodies, now understand, the room is filled with Pentagon correspondents. These are not your low-end journalists. These are high-end people. He says, look, here's what we know. He says, look, the Air Force was dropping crash test dummies in that area. And these crash test dummies is what these people thought they saw, okay? And then a reporter raised a hand and said, didn't you start dropping those in 52? And didn't people say they saw the bodies in 47?
Are we getting a little off track? I don't want to derail you, but I feel like we're going down a little path here that's taking us somewhere else.
I'll stop it right there. You know the press conference I'm talking about. The next day, Maureen Dowd, who back in 1997 was an even bigger dog than she is now. I mean, she was major, wrote a column.
I mean, your point is that Podesta's, linking to Maureen Dowd, who is a significant journalist who has done work connected to the UFO subject. And he's also replying to the publicity that you personally got moving through 2014 and into 2015. So, yeah, it's an acknowledgement.
Yeah, but the acknowledgement...
But the real... So... What's
Richard,
your fundamental thing here, though?
Let me just tell you this, Richard. Look. She's only written one column that I know of on the ET issue. It was the day after that press conference in 97 where she said the damn thing was total bullshit. Think about that. And then she hasn't written anything since. But he remembers that, and that's why he copied her. Now, whether it was a joke or whether he's sending him, I don't know. But I invite people to go read the Maureen Dowd column, July of 1997, what she thought. And when she was huge at the time of that particular press conference.
Yes, but what is your fundamental point here? Is that Podesta is a friend of disclosure? That's what it sounds like. Is that what? Am I right in interpreting?
I'm saying that he is far more than that. He knows about how badly his former boss was stonewalled. He knows the lies. He has been talking about the issue ever since, here and there, working with Kane. He has never allowed the connection of the ET to the Clintons to die. He's always thrown out the breadcrumbs, okay? And then when Obama becomes president, Obama makes him the chairman of his campaign transition team to pick the government, which included Hillary Clinton, Leon Panetta. There is a political thread running from March 29 of 1993, when Rockefeller approached the OSTP with a request to meet with the president, all the way through to the election of 2016, connecting the Clintons and Podesta and people around them to this issue, because I am absolutely convinced Hillary Clinton left the White House in 2000, hoping that Gore would win, because it might open the door for them to do something right then, but he did not win.
Relating to UFO disclosure.
The fact that her husband was disgraced, he was undermined, he was impeached, he was run around, partially because of the Rockefeller Initiative, and she intended to become president, and she intended to disclose and get that legacy. And she's carried that for 20 some years, and she was almost there. And that is why I put that stuff out there and generated all of that media, because I wanted to make sure there was no way that she could back out once she got to the White House.
All right, well, you have to let me jump in here. So you've given your analysis, and so you believe that Hillary would have been a disclosure president.
Yes.
Look, I think people listening are going to instinctively have a real problem with what you're saying. This is just my guess. Maybe I'm wrong. People's comments below can make the decision here. But we're talking about a subject. I mean, look, we've all looked into the implications of disclosure. I wrote a book about it. That doesn't make me the ultimate expert, but I've thought enough about it. Mm-hmm. And this is an absolutely revolutionary, earth-shattering phenomenon that, if it were to come out, would have tremendous unforeseen outcomes. Now, do you honestly think that a political operator, and we have to call Hillary Clinton an experienced political operator, someone with, at least in the case of Libya, has a massive amount of blood on her hands as well, but we'll just let that slide for a minute. But someone like her, that she's just going to think, oh yes, we're going to disclose UFOs, especially in an era where there was not anywhere near mainstream media support for that subject that there is now. Like, I see absolutely no indication whatsoever that Hillary Clinton would be a disclosure candidate. Now, maybe future FOIA requests going through her records might show otherwise. Of course, a lot of those emails are probably gone, but I don't see evidence that's going to come out. She knows the subject. We know that she knows the subject. We know that Bill knows the subject, no question. But that's a different thing from them saying that they believe in getting this information out. And furthermore, even if they did believe in getting this information out, the office of the White House, like all of the offices of the White House before and after, how in God's name are they going to have access to the classified labyrinth that is within the Pentagon structure? I mean, I heard from one individual at a conversation with Bill Clinton in the late 90s. I talked to this man. He's a very brilliant man. He had like 5 minutes with Clinton, I think in 97 or 98 at some function during Clinton's second term. And he said to me, yep, I had like 5 minutes alone with Bill. And I thought I would very quick. I thanked him for the work he did on FOIA to strengthen the Freedom of Information Act, which is true at some point in the Clinton White House. And then he mentioned UFOs. And Clinton, according to this man, said, yeah, I wish there was more I could do about that, but my hands are tied. I have no reason to dispute that whatsoever, that Clinton said that to this man. Okay. So there's, we can say that the president can do all of these things, but this is going to be a really difficult thing to do. And for Hillary to be as naive as to think, oh yeah, we're going to push disclosure, I don't see it. And I see that you see it. But I think, frankly, that your position is very idealistic on this. And I'm just going to, as a friend, I'm going to say you're looking at this with rose-colored glasses. And when I look at Podesta, I see an experienced political operator who has decided, because of your pressure, you have to get the credit for this, that he's going to take this information and he's going to work with it and he's going to turn with it as a PR victory. Because Hillary, look, Trump had problems as a candidate, but so did Hillary. Hillary had big problems as a candidate in connecting with ordinary people. And I think Podesta saw that this was an opportunity to give Hillary some cool kids points in the, get her on Jimmy Kimmel and do all of that stuff. And I think that's what it was. And I see no reason, and this includes Podesta's communication or lack thereof with Tom DeLonge and that whole thing.
I gotta raise my hand.
Well, you've had way more talking time than I have. So look, I'm just going to try to catch up here.
No, I'm not trying to cut you off. I thought you were close.
I am close.
Okay. So and by the way, Peter, I want you to go through this whole 2-hour thing, and I want you to measure the time between us, and I want an actual count. Okay.
Sure.
I want to be sure about this. Okay.
Folks down below can do that.
Okay. Now, first of all, you see these, baby? There ain't no rose color in those glasses. All right. So here we go.
I think
time is short.
I say with
Look,
love. Yes.
I don't have a lot of time here, and I need to aggravate you as much as possible, Richard. So let's.
You can't aggravate me. I think you're wonderful.
Okay. So first of all, I'm gonna double down. Okay, I'm about to double down big time. All right. You might say, well, how could it possibly have happened? I mean, there was no way. I mean, just because they said a couple of things. Mm-hmm. Here is what I believe was supposed to happen in 2016. Clinton was going to run for office. Okay.
But Hillary Clinton was going to run for the presidency.
If she's going to run for the presidency,
yes, okay.
All right. She would prefer not to have to get into this issue because it could lose her votes. As it happened, it didn't lose her any votes at all. In fact, it
probably won her a couple of votes.
Probably did.
I mean, small amount.
And the To the Stars Academy was supposed to launch not in 2017, but in 2016. It was supposed to launch sometime after her election, probably during the transition period, late November, early December, could be even early January.
And you say this for what reason?
I am saying it because after watching and listening and the whole thing for 3 years, that's my belief. They have never stated what their quote.
I just want to make sure, like, if you got
not inside. This is my assessment. This is my assessment. I believe it's supposed to launch in 16. They were going to trot on down to the New York Times, give them exactly the same story. Those stories would have run January, late December of 2017 or 16. Boom. Okay. Now try to imagine this. The New York Times stories hit, say, January 6, 2017, after Hillary Clinton has won the election. 400 articles have been written, including the New York Times, Washington Post, all through the campaign about her connection to the issue, not to mention the fact that Rockefeller Initiative has been known for the last 23 years. And then she goes into the White House. The reporters would have swarmed her. Why did you say this? Why did you say that? What's going on? What's going on? And the platform would have been absolutely presented to her on a silver platter, and she forces disclosure.
Except for the fact that in the entire campaign of 2016, UFOs were never discussed by either candidate, other than in a couple of little snippets by Hillary early on in the campaign trail. Like, there was no UFO conversation. There was some stupid stuff on Syria. Are you
talking about the presidential campaign 2016?
Yes, I am.
You go to my website, mm-hmm. under projects, you got the 2016 election campaign.
Didn't come up in the debates. I know that you were predicting it was going to come up in the debates.
The debates,
and it did not.
Shut it out. That's one of the reasons they never really had to confront it.
And there was really no media coverage. There was a few statements. Yes, there were some statements that Podesta encouraged Hillary to make and that Podesta himself made, but they were fairly. How much attention did they get in the context of the larger campaign?
400 articles.
And compare that with the thousands upon thousands of articles with Russia, and WikiLeaks and all that. I mean, they were drowned out.
400 articles about the leading president to be president.
Some of those articles were they all in major, like Reuters, UPI, major New York? No, they were in small newspapers.
Mainstream print articles. Every major paper, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Washington Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Times of London. They're all on my website. Check them out. All 400. 100. Well, never mind. Okay. So there's that. Okay.
And it's still. How many people do you think are really registered with? I still think many people. But 400 articles is not trivial, but it's also not as big as you're implying.
The point is not how many people it registered with. The point is all of the reporters that wrote those articles and could never get any responses from them. Once she wins the presidency, you think they're going to say, okay, don't need to follow up on that. She's just president now. And by the way, I also have every one of the times they address this issue. So 11 times that they address this issue.
It's entirely possible she would have had to address it. I agree with that.
And she did.
But to say that if she had won the election, it's entirely possible that this would have continue to percolate. But the real question is, what would really have been done about it?
Well,
talking points.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just a couple of talking points, some blather about, well, we'll look into it. Possibly. We might be in a similar position. In fact, we probably would be in a similar position with this whole issue that we are now. And maybe I will grant, maybe we would be like 6 months ahead. I don't think we would be significantly ahead. So whether or not Hillary Clinton would be a disclosure president any more than Trump would have been, I just think we'll never know, but I also think the odds are probably not.
There are two people that do know.
Who are those people? You are
Hillary
one of them, obviously.
Hillary and Bill Clinton know. And so one day they will tell us. We'll find out about that, okay? And so
don't think that they will tell us.
All right. Now, I want to put a call out now to all the bookies in London and DraftKings. All right. And by the way, there's a lot of bookies here. Betting in the United States is growing and growing and growing, and there's a lot of British bookies that are opening up shops here. So
thanks to COVID, thanks to the lockdowns, people got
over the last 10 years. I have made 3 disclosure bets with bookies in London. One of them, I had 600 to 1 odds. I could have made a ton of money. Then I got 100 to 1 odds. The last time I think I got.
Well, how would you have made a ton of money? We still haven't had disclosure. I
lost all those bets. I'm just
you and
saying.
I were going to make. You could have made a bet with me in 2002. I don't want to bring up, but in 2002, you and I were in New York City, man, and this is George W. Bush, and you're like, it's going to happen. And I was like, are you smoking? I want whatever you're smoking because I want that optimism.
Actually, I made these bets later. This is like 2008, 2012, whatever the hell. Anyway, the point is now I'm letting all the bookies know to get ready to put some odds together to make some bucks, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, because I'm going to tell you what I believe is going to happen. I'm doubling down here. Okay, I'm hanging it completely.
Please,
out there,
we insist. I insist
because that is how I roll. All right.
Do you think the Biden administration is going to do it? They're going to move ahead with disclosure?
I believe is about to happen. Okay. Everybody take notes. Oh, by the way, and I've got it on record now.
I'm writing down in the air.
This is perfect. Okay. The report from the esteemed ONI, the Department of Defense, will be delivered by the end of the month. They are not going to delay it. Okay. It will be reasonable, interesting. It will raise some points, but it's not going to be earth-shaking. I can't speak to the classified portion. It will be delivered to the Intel Committee, and the Intel Committee will review it for, about 3 to 4 days. And then they will release the unclassified portion to the press, and we will all see it. Okay? So that we're talking basically around July 2, 3, 4, probably after 4th of July holiday. Everybody's chewing it over and reading it and everything else. Okay, fine. Not too many days after that, Mark Rubio or Mark Warner or both of them together, since in the Intel Committee and the Senate, they tend to work as partners, right? It's as nonpartisan as possible as it gets these days, are going to make an announcement that based on the report and other things, they're going to call hearings in front of the Intel Committee. And I don't think it'll take a lot to put them together. They could easily put them together.
You believe they are definitely going to call hearings?
I am saying it is my assessment that they are going to call for hearings. Now,
okay.
One of the reasons I believe that is because we have confirmation, real facts, that Christopher Mellon and to some degree Elizondo have been briefing members on the Hill for the last 2.5 years.
Them and also Eric Davis.
And other people have given briefings, including and they're focusing on the key committees. All right. And as I said recently, Elizondo confirmed in his interview with the Washington Post, which we need to talk about before we close out, that he was actually doing briefings back during ATIP. In other words, and these briefings were all off the record. I say off the record; they were not for press. There was
they talk about things like crash retrievals. Yeah, what I've gathered, they've gotten into it. There's been some serious conversations behind closed doors.
There is only one reason that you brief members of key committees privately like that. It's not so you want to hang out with them or you like the food in the house cafeteria. You only brief them for one reason, and that is to prepare them for hearings. Okay, now the other thing we know is that for the last 2.5 years, Elizondo, at minimum, has been receiving contacts in the scores and scores of military people who figured out from the Unidentified series and, of course, the New York Times article that the bar just got dropped and that coming forward and talking about your personal experiences while working on aircraft carriers, destroyer airplanes, submarines, whatever the hell, you're not going to get cashiered. You're not going to lose your pension. You're not going to be taken to jail. And we don't know how many, but there has been allusions to scores, as in
Gentlemen,
50, 60.
10
Yes,
minutes. 10 minutes. Continue on.
Okay. And so we know that they have had the opportunity to vet scores of witnesses. We know they have been briefing members of Congress almost certainly for the point of hearings. Therefore, the key agenda, I believe, from the key people, which is Elizondo, Mellon, and Steve Justice, who, by the way, conveniently stepped out of the TTSA about 5 weeks ago, because we're getting to the point where these hearings need to be negotiated. In other words, the staff and the people that have the goods have to work it out. And the House committee people and Senate committee people are not going to negotiate with the TTSA, a public benefit corporation with a multiple agenda and a bunch of people on the staff. So they stepped out as private citizens.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I agree with you up to this point.
The hearings will begin in July.
Okay.
Mid-July. Okay.
It's possible. You know why? I wouldn't rule out one guy we haven't talked about too much. You just mentioned is Chris Mellon. And Mellon, I agree. Like, he knows how to maneuver, and
Sure.
You may have chatted with. I've chatted with Chris Mellon on a number of occasions actually, and he knows how to play this game. I mean, he actually worked within SAPOC, that's Special Access Program Oversight Committee. Sure. He had a key position there. He knows all these players, and I think it was he who really was able to get Leslie and Ralph and Helene Cooper to get the New York Times piece way back in 2017. I think he's played a lot of behind the scenes roles, and I think he would be very likely not averse to having hearings. I think you're probably right.
That's why he's in the TTSA.
Yeah, and it could happen.
That's why he's in the TTSA. Right. All right. And so these hearings, here's again, I'm laying it all out for the betting people, the odds people, whatever the hell. These hearings will be watched by more people that have ever watched any program on television in the history.
There's going to be a huge tension with these hearings. This is the fascinating thing. If there are genuine UFO hearings, the question that I will be really wanting to know is, are they going to go over the red line?
No.
The red line is crash retrievals and admission of a genuine cover-up. It's
they're
going to
not.
be right. I agree with you, but
They're
it's a tremendous tension.
Well, it's like,
it's because it's this. I mean, almost a year ago, Leslie and Ralph nearly went over. They had Davis and they had Harry Reid quoted like this close to the line of crash retrieval, and then Reid had to walk it back. And Leslie and Ralph did an interesting interview where they were very, very careful about how they were wording all of this. So I don't know. Like, it's a dangerous game to be doing these hearings, and that's why I'll be shocked if it actually happens, but I'll be fascinated. The way they're going about this public relation extrication project is to make it as non-dangerous as possible. Now, the witnesses are going to be strictly military. There may be some government contractor people that were civilians working on government highly classified programs related to the ET issue, which might explain why Steve Justice stepped out along with Elizondo and Mellon, because he would be the appropriate guy to deal with that. Military witnesses only, the best witnesses you can have. They sign an oath when they sign up to serve. Their careers are completely known. They can be easily vetted, and when they sit down at the table, they take another oath, and they will be limited to discussing the national security implications of this phenomena. Okay, and if they're asked any question that they can't properly answer under NDAs, all they have to say is, "I can't answer that, Senator, in public, but I'm happy to give you an answer to that in a classified hearing." These hearings will go on for X number of days. They will spread to other committees, because I assure you, with hundreds of millions of people watching, every single committee chair in that House and Senate want to have a hearing. Now, I don't think the Agriculture Committee is going to get one, but you're going to have other committees involved. And once these hearings have gone on for X number of days, they will have achieved what they set out to do. And that is to finally hand the President of the United States the platform and the basis on which to end this truth embargo in a way that is appropriate, not destructive, not disruptive, and in a way that the president... There's no way to do it that's not destructive. It's not possible.
Minimally
it will be destructive.
Minimally destructive. And so the president will come out along these lines. And I'm talking now end of July, early August.
I know you're very optimistic.
The president. Well, then you want to put your bets down and get the odds. So look, here's the
Richard,
deal.
Steve, 5 minutes.
Okay.
I have to reply to this. You have to let me. Right, then be all right.
Okay.
Go.
The president can now say this, which is where we've been trying to get to ever since Keogh tried to get hearings in 52 and NICAP in 53 and 54, at Greer in 2001, and at least 6 other attempts to get hearings, because that is the way this has to end. The president can say, my fellow American, for the last 8 days, I have been watching this extraordinary testimony in front of Congress as you have. And I have now discussed this testimony with top people in the Pentagon as well as top congressional leaders. And we have come to the consensus that this evidence does indeed confirm that this phenomena is extraterrestrial. It is not human. It is off planet. And we're going to hold more hearings, and you're going to learn a lot more in the post-disclosure world.
Right, if that happens, especially by late July, I'll be amazed, and I will gladly give you massive props. Just don't expect it to happen. The problem they're going to have, right? You got several issues to resolve. First of all, you have a public that wouldn't even, half those people wouldn't even believe. We have a broken culture. We have a broken society with zero any agreement on anything. So right now in the UFO community, you've got Elizondo and co dropping all this information out. You've got half the community or more throwing rotten tomatoes at them to begin with. But let's just say we have the hearings. Well, you have to resolve a few issues. China and Russia. Everyone knows this is not China and Russia, despite the fact that the War Zone had an article, Tyler Rogaway, a couple of months ago, trying to state that it was China and Russia. I don't know who really believes that. I don't think it was China and Russia. If it is, you've got war, and I just can't see that anyone actually believes that. So you got to rule out the Chinese and the Russians, and you've got to rule out U.S. covert ops, covert technology. Do you really think they're going to do that and just go full on ET by the middle of the summer? I absolutely cannot believe that'll happen.
The Pentagon already ruled out China and Russia in the leak that they gave to the New York Times.
Yeah, well, no one believes it's China and Russia, so right, but they've been playing this game, this fiction of, well, we don't know what these things are, and they're gonna drag that out as long as possible. But by having hearings. First of all, I'm not convinced that there will be immediate hearings out of this. And by the way, even if they wanted to do hearings, what makes you think they're going to have it in the immediate month after the conclusion of this report? You're saying end of July? How long does it take to organize these hearings? Because
of the preparation of these hearings has been going on for 2 years. The massive media that you're seeing now, it's going to get even bigger. This is just the beginning. And when that announcement comes from the
I just want to point out, Sagaranjetti supposedly just got canceled off the Hill. Now, I don't know if it's
actually,
him
I
or
have
the
a
Hill.
friend of mine. I have a friend of mine that talked about that.
Is it him or is it the entire show?
They deliberately are separating out. They want their own podcast, and they're going to be huge. They're going to be massive, and they're going to.
They're both big as it is. So
they're already big, and they're going to get even bigger. They wanted to separate from the Hill. It's too limiting. So don't. It's not a negative. It's actually a positive. I love these people. I'm trying to get on their show. Hey, have me on, Saturday. Both Rising. I want to do Rising, please, for God's sake. So, I've laid it all out. I've bared my soul. I'm not going to place any bets because, I don't have any money left. But the point is that I've told you what I think is going to happen, and I would love to do more interviews in all venues and elaborate on this. Okay. Not to prove you wrong, Richard. Look, let's face it, my friend. If I'm right, do you realize how much your boat's going to get floated?
I would love for you to be right. I've always
what do you got? 20 books?
My friend Stephen Bassett to be right.
Yeah, I haven't even got a book, right?
So I'm rooting for you, and I do think there may be the window. We're out of time here. The window is closing because you've got a disclosure movement. And at the same time, we have a global movement that is going exactly the opposite direction of total control for the rest of all time of you, your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. And I'm telling you, it's not a good future.
Let me ask
not a good future. And so we've got a limited amount of time to break through and actually achieve some kind of genuine oversight over the entire structure that is enveloping us as we speak.
All right, here's your close, Peter. You ready for this?
Ready.
Richard talked about the fact that this might not happen because the world is broken. Consider the possibility that there's a lot of people, these very smart people in Washington and politicians and military and agencies, all this stuff, that may actually think that ending this truth embargo is how to unbreak the world. And because we are short on time is why these hearings can't happen.
It is how to unbreak the world, or at least it's one way to try. And whether there'll be the political will in D.C. is really the issue. If you think
all I've
that's
got.
the case, then great.
Richard and Steve, the window is closing. We unfortunately have to stop now, but before I go to the closing, listen, guys, this dialogue is too important to stop. Let me ask you right now, can we make this a regular feature on this show to bring you back every few months and continue this dialogue?
Few months?
I'm game.
Few months?
Okay.
Are you kidding me? You said the pace of things
We'll
here.
figure
Peter?
it out, Peter.
We will lock something.
We'll be here.
We'll lock something down before the end of summer, no later than September. I can't thank you both enough for this. This is Peter Robbins with Meanwhile Here on Earth on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. My esteemed guests and dear friends this evening have been Steve Bassett and Richard Dolan. Richard's website is richarddolanmembers.com. Steve's main website is paradigmresearchgroup.org, and the Disclosure Wire podcast can be found at disclosure.org. Next week's guest is a filmmaker who I admire and respect, and you've never heard of him. He is a writer, producer, and director, and in December, his most recent film, The 11th Green, dropped on Amazon. It is a brilliantly realized and very low-key what-if about the Eisenhower extraterrestrial connection. He has also done a wonderful film about Bigfoot, Letters from the Big Man, but his work in Hollywood is remarkable. I encourage you to see The 11th Green before next week. We will be talking about these films, of course, his other films, the creative process, and the importance of making quality UFO-related films that both entertain, inform, and educate. If you've enjoyed this show, please tell your friends. We will see you next week, same time, same station. Stay well, stand up for what you believe in, and be kind to each other.